Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we continue our COVID-19 webinar series. My name is Yoshi Domoto. I'm the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Georgia, and I'm so thrilled to have our group of panelists today with us to talk about how universities and higher education is managing the crisis that we are all facing today. With us today, we have from Georgia State University, Dr. Karen Locke. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Yoshi. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. We have from Mercer University, Dr. Julie Strecker.
Hi, thanks, Yoshi.
And then we have our esteemed moderator, our co-chair of our programs committee with the Japan America Society and veteran higher education professional, Mr. Jim Hoadley.
Hi, everybody.
Well, Jim, would you like to go and get started? We only have an hour to discuss. I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours and days about this topic, but it'd be great to get started and kind of talk about ways universities are dealing with our crisis right now.
Well, certainly. It's great to be here. It's great to be sharing this information. You know, it's been used an awful lot, but these are definitely unprecedented times. And one thing working at an institution of higher education is people who work in these types of institutions are primarily concerned about their students. And I think I want to speak for the entire panel to say that our first thought and concern is for our students and the broader communities that they're a part of. And we want to do our part to assist during this time of crisis. So the first question that I want to ask is to Karen Locke, and then maybe Julie, if you have some additional, you can join in as well. So Karen, what steps has your university taken to address COVID-19 that you are authorized to share?
Well, okay, so you know, from my experience and speaking on behalf of Georgia State in that, you know, what we're doing specifically, I think first order was early on was a lot of communication. The communication was coming down from the president and provost and then at the college level. And there was a quick also marshaling of resources where we were creating a strategic task force at the university level with very key personnel being pulled into there that had, you know, lines of sight across the entire institution and up into state government because we are a state institution. But at the college level, we created a strategic task force that had representation from all of our department units. And then at the department level, we created also task force that were champions. And the point there was, one, is to make sure that we were helping the faculty to make this transition, because we actually had a 2-week period that my understanding was a state decision, but we were to make this transition from any face-to-face to everything at distance. Not a formal online, but we were going to be distance education, and we did that. So that's the marshalling of the resources. And then I think the third thing I would say, Jim, to your point, is not just students, but people first. Being really mindful of what's happening with everybody across our landscape. You know, we had faculty that were exposed, you know, what was happening with our students, the whole 9 yards. So people first.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. I did want to highlight when you put in there the establishment of committees. I know, gosh, I don't know what I'm authorized to say, but I do know in some cases there were study abroad assignments to locations that were affected because the areas that were affected were not affected at the same rate at the same time. And there was uncertainty as to whether those programs were going to go or not. And in a particular case that I'm very familiar with, the presence of a committee that had been assembled to deal with study abroad COVID-19 issues was able to make the call so that the instructor was not required to do that. And I think that the instructor, it gave the dispassionate distance that was necessary to make the right decision. So definitely.
I'm sure Julie can answer more to that, but just let me speak to that because that was also clearly an issue for us. But actually our all those decisions came down from top with our International Initiatives Office. And I'm sure I'm not on the inside of those conversations. I'm sure that everybody was involved in it at the appropriate levels, but the actual decision, so to your point, it wasn't, resting on the shoulders of an individual faculty member, for example.
Right, because given if the students are left to their own devices, that some students are going to want to go regardless, if at all possible, and that puts the faculty member in the unenviable position of having to either play the bad guy or to go to a particular location that they may not be comfortable with, simply to make sure that the students are supported and if assistance is necessary, they can be there to render it. So, but anyway, enough about hypothetical situations that I know nothing about. Let's move to Julie Strecker. And Julie, you have additional perspective because you also work with international students as well.
Right. My role at Mercer is the Director of International Programs. So I oversee our study abroad programs and our incoming international students and managing, all of their immigration issues and then their ability to just become accustomed to culture on campus. And so for us, the first question, it was kind of, for me, it was study abroad. Everything was happening abroad. It wasn't happening on the ground. So communication, like Karen said, it was really the first thing on our mind, reaching out to all of our students. We were lucky with the short-term faculty-led study abroad programs that our spring break was earlier than most schools. So we really were bringing our students back just at the time where most schools were worried about whether or not to send their students. So that was fortunate for us. But we had a number of students abroad on a full semester program. And so it was kind of discovering how to communicate with those students, what to communicate with those students, and kind of the same issue, whether or not to put the decision to come home on the student's shoulders or to mandate it. That was an interesting experience for me. In speaking to parents of students, of course, the parents wanted the university to just across the board say, bring the students home. The students didn't have the same perspective. A lot of our students wanted to stay where they were. And then, there's always the decisions that other schools are making too that factor into that. People say, oh, well, the friend of my student who's abroad got called home. Why aren't you calling your students home? Or that kind of questioning. So figuring out who to contact, when, and what to say from the perspective of the International Programs Office was certainly first and foremost in our minds. And we kind of were out in front of the university's response because we were responding to the study abroad issue. And then when just about the same time, the university started really thinking about, oh, we need to do something about this too. It's starting to affect things on the US side. That's when we pivoted to working with our international students and making sure that they felt comfortable here and helping them decide, as we were moving online with our learning platforms, but that the timing wasn't sure and we didn't know if we were going to stay online for the rest of the semester yet or not. The international students needed to decide, am I going to go home? What happens if I go home and then we return to face-to-face classes? How am I going to get back? And so again, kind of working through all of those issues were really what we were dealing with in our department.
Well, it sounds like it's certainly been a lot of everything. I was going to ask and the unexpected challenges question. I think they're all unexpected challenges because this whole thing is in many ways unexpected. But is there something that comes to your mind if I ask something that has been an issue that you wouldn't, that really every time that you come across this issue, you think to yourself, gee, why are we having an issue with this?
I know, Jim, we had talked about that and I gave a lot of thought to it. And I don't know that there was anything that continues to be an unexpected challenge. I think we knew from the get-go that, wow, this is going to be hard. And maybe we didn't have a realization of how hard. and how complex it is. There's so many moving parts, and the parts are moving so quickly. And, you know, so you're trying to stay in some kind of a tight loop, short circuit in terms of, you know, keeping your finger on the pulse and what's happening and being responsive. But I think everyone does have a sense of feeling overwhelmed on some level, shape, or form, you know, and it varies for the individual depending on their own personal circumstances. You know, for our typical undergrad students, it might be more that they've lost their employment. And so they're trying to figure out how to stay in classes and finish when they don't have laptops at home and school's closed now, and how they're going to do that versus how they're going to pay for food or rent or those kinds of challenges, right? There's a huge life challenges happening. But you take the older student, and now they may be working from home, but they have their kids at home and they're supposed to be homeschooling and, you know, all these other things. And all of a sudden, instead of seeing each other, you know, a few hours at night or, you know, whoever that might be, you're seeing each other 24/7. And that's just another dynamic. So, you know, and it's such a different rhythm. So I think those things are persistent challenges. I don't know that they're unexpected challenges.
Julie, did you have any more to add on that, or?
No, I mean, I agree. You know, just I think that most of our challenges were expected. I think that it's just trying to figure out how to prioritize them and how to attend to each of them with the care and the attention that they need, you know, because there are so many moving parts and you've only got so many people to be able to manage the problems. I think that that's really just, you know, the challenge of managing the stress and managing the priorities is really the hardest part, but I wouldn't see that as unexpected. Honestly, if there's anything unexpected that I've experienced out of all of this, it's our unexpected success. I think that in a lot of ways, we didn't expect ourselves to be able to move as quickly as we did and get our courses online as quickly as we did and continue the education of our students and the support of our students. And, you know, I don't think that we expected to be this successful at it. And I think that that's a great thing to realize, that we're capable of so much more than we thought we were.
Yeah. Let me jump in real quick. I'd just like to second that, because I think that is testimony to how amazing the faculty and the staff, the administration have worked together, and the students. The students they've been great, you know. So I agree. I think that's a very, very good point.
I also wanted to add a personal observation that, yes, I agree with everything that you've said, Julie and Karen. And I also wanted to add that I'm also, as many of us are, one of those people who has a third grader working from home. And I marvel with how easily and smoothly her third grade has transitioned to all online learning. They have morning announcements with the principal every morning. They have discussion meetings at set times during the day using, I believe, Zoom, one of the platforms. And they've just done an amazing job of transitioning from being completely in school to being completely out of school. And you would not think at this point that they had been in any other modality. So, do you think that there are issues that are out there that, you know, the icebergs that are floating out there to sink our Titanic? Something that should be addressed that we haven't addressed yet?
I'm not sure there's anything that we haven't addressed yet, but going back to what Karen had said about, you know, our students and they're facing unemployment and they're facing their own personal challenges moving forward with this, you know, that's the iceberg. We know it's there, but we don't know how big it is and we don't know how deep it is. And I think that until we get closer to it, you know, we're only going to speculate, but all of the ramifications of the size of it, you know, are still unknown, and that's what we're all kind of facing.
Yeah, I would add two things. One is it's just the unknown of the unknowns, which creates a lot of uncertainty. And then the second is the time. So the longer it persists, then it's likely that other things may emerge. Maybe it's a magnitude of the impact that we'll see more of. Maybe we'll see different things that in fact we at first blush haven't seen, but I think that's the two factors, and it creates this swirl of uncertainty, right? So time will tell.
Well, that's actually a great segues into the next question that I had, Karen. So thanks for setting it up like that. What kind of impacts do you anticipate for the coming year, or is it too early to speculate?
Oh, I don't think it's too early to speculate. But I would say it's not to speculate, but I think we need to be very intentional about thinking our plan forward, and start to put people and things in place in anticipation. But where are some likely impacts? And I'm sure Julie can elaborate on this, but for sure, we'll expect some impacts with respect to our international students. And it's on two levels. And some institutions, of course, are going to be much more heavily impacted than others because the proportion of international students they have to their domestic populations, right? But one is that they're simply going to have difficulty in getting visas. And the embassies or the consular offices are closed. So they're not even processing visas. Of course, the ability to get a visa from country A to country B may depend on what country A is and what country B is. So this is not unique to just coming to the US, but that's our lens, right? Similarly, the candidates may not have a comfort level of coming or leaving their home country and coming into a completely, new environment when there's so much other uncertainty going on, nor their family's comfort. So there's that whole piece. And part of that, as terms of our application process, are these required standardized tests, right? So at undergrad level, you have SATs, ACTs, which all that testing has been postponed. At graduate level, you've got any of the professional, requirements that we ask, and those aren't available either. So there's been a relaxation on that part. But all of this is going to affect and raise the question of where are we going to be from a university perspective, from a program perspective, what's going to be the impact on student enrollment numbers, which then correlates to budgets. And you can just walk that through to its logical conclusion. So, all of that remains unknown. And I know that we, with Georgia State being a public institution, the governor's already kind of, put that signal out there. But we're in these conversations about, what do you do? How do you prepare if you've got big downfall in these different areas? So, yeah.
Julie, before I ask you, I just want to let people know that the Q&A section is open, and we are seeing there are questions that are starting to populate in. We're going to save those for the end, but please feel free to add them as we go on. Just a little housekeeping there. So Julie, from your standpoint, particularly working with the international students, I think you would have your best finger on the pulse to talk about how it's going to be impacting international students.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Karen hit some of the biggest issues. I mean, visas certainly, families' comfort level, student comfort level coming to the United States, especially not knowing where COVID is going to go. And economics as well. I mean, families abroad who had the funds to send their students to the United States may no longer have the funds. I think unemployment is an issue around the world, not just in the United States. So, that's another piece of the puzzle. And then just schools abroad also being impacted there, maybe not finishing, the seniors not graduating when they would have graduated if terms are being pushed back beyond dates that align well with our incoming terms, then, when the students are available to come to the U.S., maybe pushed back into the future, which could affect our fall enrollments or our spring enrollments. And then, so even though we are making maybe concessions for standardized testing, Mercer has decided to go test optional next year as one way to manage the standardized testing issues. There are just so many layers of challenges, I think, to get the students to the United States that we are certainly going to see a dip in international student enrollment next year for sure. And, who knows after that. And then, on the other side of it with study abroad, I'm wondering about recruiting students to travel abroad as well. That's a conversation I've been having with my staff. How much momentum is there anymore for students to just jump on a plane and go abroad, either for a semester, a year, or even a short-term program with faculty? What we've been seeing is that the faculty are still putting in their proposals for next year, so we're excited about that. And we've gotten involved in a few social media campaigns through Facebook and Instagram to try and keep our students engaged in a global mindset. But, we don't really know how that's going to play out once the students are back on campus and we start advising them again. So that'll be interesting as well.
Jim, there's two additional things I'd mention. One is that what we do at the university level, we really also are hoping, and we're working in concert with, for example, in this case, it's the federal government. So the requirement for international students to come here and get their visas is that they also have to show up at a particular time, which is before the semester starts. And, so there's all these other, these rules around how visas are given and operate.
Right.
And it is clear that we need to have some relaxation or extenuating circumstances there. So, this collaboration across all of our different entities is really important for us. And the other thing, though, that we're doing to try to keep internationalizing our students, if you will, even if they're not traveling, is so we currently have a study abroad going on, but it's happening virtually. This is one that I'm familiar with because one of my colleagues is the lead faculty member on it. And some of the site visits that were set up and the conversations, they're being done virtually. So it's not quite the same as being on site and having all of these, that deep, rich experience, but it's still giving some insight in terms of what's happening in exposure, with the hope, like Julie says, that I think, that we get back to being able to have actually travel overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you have to make a visit to a particular embassy in order to get a visa stamp, in order to travel there, and the embassy is closed, you can't get that visa stamp.
Yeah, precisely.
And those rules are not written to be flexible enough to allow that process to be done like through a Zoom meeting or something like that.
Yeah.
So we're there. I think that might be one of the icebergs out there, is that we're heading up towards that, and we don't know how big a problem that's going to be, whether we can adjust course to come up with some other modality that people can get these, that meets the legal precedent. But this is obviously far above my pay grade.
Yeah, mine too.
Mine too.
But it's
All of
a
us
factor
put
that
together.
affects it, right? It rolls down. So.
Right. So there's going to be possibly a decrease in interest, and also a decrease in, even if people do have interest, you're going to increase the level of difficulty for them to come and study in the U.S. as well. So it's unavoidable. It's just a statement of what the situation is going to be. I'm not trying to editorialize on that.
Right. And the one other thing I'll add to that is post graduation, right? So a lot of our students are here on optional practical training, serving in their internships, and they may or may not have been laid off currently. And, the rules are very rigid surrounding OPT and how long students can be unemployed. And so without a relaxation of that time period, for example, we may lose more students who are here to engage in the workforce and lose opportunities to employ students with really special skills. So we're hoping NAFSA is the largest international education organization out there, and they're doing a great deal of advocacy right now to try and get the State Department or the USCIS to relax some of those OPT rules, and we're hoping that they'll make some progress with that.
Of course,
yeah, that's true, because I was in conversation with one of my former students. She's getting set for graduation. She was supposed to have an internship this summer. The internships got pulled.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprisingly, but so, all of those things, and particularly if it is a requirement of the program, then it also puts a real challenge in terms of their ability to successfully complete their program or the timing thereof. So, you start to get a lot of wrinkles. It remains to see what the big numbers are on that. But if it impacts you, then it becomes real personal.
True.
So, right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any advice for other university faculty and staff or people who are running educational programs? Because I think we might have some in the audience both now and after when they go back and review the recording. What would be the best way to do things?
What we really focused on is engaging our students, keeping our students engaged. So, beyond just the asynchronous or synchronous learning that we're providing through Zoom, we're really trying to keep them engaged, either by hosting morning announcements or having cooking lessons on the weekends or starting a conversation program between study abroad students and international students. Starting social media campaigns. We're doing a virtual world tour right now through our study abroad office, just anything that we can do to keep the students engaged. And I think from a bigger standpoint too, Mercer has done that. Mercer created a coronavirus page to the main website of the university, and that's where we're publishing all of our official announcements and statements by the president. We've all gotten together and developed FAQs at a variety of interest areas. So FAQs for international students, for students who want to live on campus or stay on campus, FAQs for graduate students and undergraduate students. And anytime any of our policies are changing, any of our decisions are coming down the pike, all of that gets published on that coronavirus site. So just, keeping our stakeholders engaged, I think, is really what's most important as we move through this.
So at Georgia State, we've done very, very similar things. So, I won't repeat that. I would say a couple of additional things that Julie didn't mention. One is that we have a lot of resources that we make available to the students, and we make sure, I think it's the communication is key there. And this resources begins with financial support. So we've created a special fund for students that may have emergency financial needs that they can tap into. We have mental health resources for students that are feeling that they need somebody to talk to or reach out, or other kinds of support. Our healthcare center is open and follows protocols, but if students need that and they're here locally, we still have about 150 students that are living in the dorm. They have no place else to go. This is their home, and we've accommodated them. They're all in a single building. They're all in single rooms with their own private bathrooms, so it maintains all of the protocols for social distancing and so on. And we make sure that they get food. The cafeteria is not open, but food's delivered and so on and so forth. So all of those resources, I think, in making sure that the students know that, and the faculty as well, and this continued communication, I think is a big piece of it. And then I would say flexibility, adapting as things rise, and knowing who to go to. We do have a central point of command, if you will, that makes sure that we're consistent in our messaging and not saying things inappropriate or out of turn, and then patience, I think.
Yeah, I want to make very clear that the next thing that I'm about to say comes from a position of, yes, I understand that this is a global crisis, and I understand that there are a lot of people who are being affected in a very negative way, so I don't want to seem glib about it. But sometimes I think that when you're going through a terrible crisis, it is helpful to focus on the positives that are coming out of it. I don't want to exclude the negatives. You know, they're very large, and we need to deal with those. But going forward, do you feel that there are some positives that are coming out of this that will be helpful and applicable to us in the future?
Oh, I did.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. See, we're excited to say yes.
I know. No, I absolutely see positives. And for me, I've said this to the faculty in my program, in our English program. You know, we've now seen what we're capable of, which I think is an extremely positive thing. And we're learning new ways to engage with each other and with our students. And so I think that, you know, we're not just going to turn off our computers and walk away from Zoom after this and never come back to it. You know, we'll be able to incorporate some of the distance things that we've done and continue to engage our students in ways that are more convenient, perhaps, for students, and a little bit more interesting. And it's, you know, when you do synchronous learning, we have small classes in our English program. So for me, you know, we are actually more engaged on a personal level with some of our students than we've been in the past in this. So I think that's a positive as well.
I think there's several. You know, from an institutional perspective, program perspective, I think that the robustness of the infrastructure has been really great and has shown to hold up. I think we have upskilled our faculty and staff and our students in a very short period of time that will have benefits going forward. And I think that this is kind of a, you know, a forced creativity innovation period, but, you know, we'll come back from this when we have a little bit of a moment to process it rather than being in the fire. I think that we'll think about things to being, you know, doing things in a different fashion rather than the same old that perhaps we had gotten into. And then the last thing I would say, that I see this with the students in particular, and especially if you have a little bit larger class, you know, this is an equalizer. And so you can get all of your students engaged, actually, rather than having somebody that comes in and likes to sit in front and maybe dominate because they like to talk a lot. And then you've got the individual that's more shy or more reticent. But with the technology and the asynchronous in particular, everybody has the opportunity to have a voice. And I see that as a difference in my classes. So.
Great. Thank you both for your input. I think we're turning it over now to Q&A. We're almost on time with that. So looking at the Q&A list, it's only populated one question for me so far. That might be an issue with my connection. So we'll work behind the scenes to get that. But I'll ask that question. It says, what do we know about the short-term effect to the ability of the ability to provide a tuition assistance and the health of university endowments due to the COVID-19 situation? Wow, I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole, but I'll leave that up to you.
So I can speak to that because very early, one of the things that Georgia State did is launched a special foundation fund specifically earmarked to support students that were in financial stress due to the COVID-19. And I don't know the particulars of how they're administering that. I leave that to them, but I know that that's consistent with how Georgia State steps in to try to help our students and our Students for Success initiative. So we are doing that. And what was this? There was a second part to that question.
And what is the situation for university endowments relative to?
Well,
That was the part I was afraid of.
We don't have endowments like, let's say, Harvard. So I'll step away from that. I think the fact that we have a special fund, it's earmarked for that, and I don't know that the endowments really enter into that equation. But let me say that probably is well above my pay grade here.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have enough insight. I think I'd probably end up speculating and making things up. So I probably shouldn't try and answer that question.
I work in higher education, but not in development. So I definitely don't know anything about endowments. I do know a particular institution that, similar to what Karen described, immediately as the crisis was unfolding, sent out a missive to all alumni asking for support for the existent student support fund, and they've been collecting a great deal of money for that to support students who are impacted by this and are unable to, everything from pay tuition to it can be used for a wide variety of financial needs. So it is great to see people reaching out and to support students from their alma maters in time of need.
Yeah, and what I can say about Mercer in general, we're a smaller private university, and whether or not we have funds available or special funds in this situation, I think that we do tend to look at each student on a case-by-case basis. And our students are extremely important to us. We've kept our dorms open because we have students who also view the campus as home, and we're going to do everything we can to help our students as much as we can. And so I think that that's kind of the most important for me. And actually one of the reasons that I love working for Mercer is that we go outside the box on an individual basis for each of our students to try and figure out how to help them.
I guess there's one other thing, and that is just back to the communication. So there's a lot coming down from the federal level with respect to financial aid and how that's going to be managed, right? And repayment of loans and deferred interest and so on and so forth. And so on our COVID page, there's a section that deals all specifically with that. So if students are needing or wanting to find information about, okay, what's happening with my loan repayments and so on and so forth, it's there. It identifies where they can go for the resources. Financial aid is there if they've got questions and so on. So, it's a multi-level kind of response in that regard.
Okay, I have another question from the question and answer bin. And another one that we may not be qualified to answer, but let's give it a shot anyway. How are university job placement offices working with soon-to-be graduates and young alumni on job prospects?
Well, what I can say is that our student, our support center, they reached out recently and were asking faculty to help with their networks, to make introductions and so on, to keep those maybe communication channels more open, or identify opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be somehow sorted through into the process. And then I see individual faculty or individual students, because I've been contacted by some who have, sent me their information. I've had either they've worked for me or they were in my class or something in past, and saying, hey, can you help me? Here's what I'm looking for. And so I think there's a lot of that going on as well.
And I think what I can say that I know of at Mercer is that Mercer is aware that that's a very, very important service for the students. And in terms of marshaling resources, I think that the university is mindful of the fact that our career and professional development department is going to need more assistance in the coming months to help the graduating students find jobs. And so, they're looking at how to make sure that that department is supported the way it needs to be supported in order to support our students.
Yeah, but there's some good news there, though, because our head of career services did did share that companies are still contacting career services. So it's not like that they've, completely dried up. There's conversations to be had. And so that I think is a very, very positive note.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's all there. We can definitely focus on the jobs that have been lost and the impact on the economy, but I think there's also right now going on a lot of shifting as well. Mm-hmm. And if we can adapt and shift to that new modality, I don't think that that there's no possibility. It's a loss, but it's not a complete zero or failure of that. So I think people should be optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Jim, I had a private question come in. So Julie and Karen, I know both Mercer University and Georgia State University, you guys are doing a whole lot to support students. But from a personal perspective, what advice or encouragement can you give students in terms of academics or time management, mental health? If you want to talk about kind of some of your personal advice that you can give out to your students or any student that will be listening in later or kind of watching later, that'd be great.
Well, for my students, I communicate, so my current students, so let me speak to current students. I communicate with my students regularly, at least twice a week. I remind them of different things. If for example, some of my students have to put up a media clip that then everybody else has to watch, right? And if those media clips get put up early, then I let everybody know, hey, it's up there, so that they can then take advantage of it because it's the time crunches. Humor. I think humor is really important here. And so I try to find things that, okay, maybe I think it's funny, and then I test it with them to see if they think it's interesting. But nevertheless, to just even for a moment, I think that humor is important. Whether you're an incoming student or a current student, I can't stress enough the importance of communicating. So communicate with your faculty if you're in a current class. Communicate with your counselors or advisors if you're incoming. If you have questions about where resources are, whether it be health care, mental health questions, challenges, it really doesn't matter. Find that individual that you feel comfortable with and ask. Because I think that definitely everyone is willing to and wants to help. And so I just would encourage people to step out and ask, because if you don't ask, we can continue to reach out, but it's hard to help if you don't know that there's an issue. And the issues vary so dramatically that I think just encourage folks to step up and to ask.
Yeah, I think I can mostly only just echo what Karen said. We remind our students that they need to stay connected, and we remind them that they need to communicate with us what their needs are. We try to use humor. We try to use uplifting. Every morning in our morning announcements, we have a quote of the day. We try to let them know that we're there for them. And we just encourage them to take advantage of the resources that we've got for them and to remind them that they're not alone. We try to stay empathetic with the students who are potentially in a very small space, alone, with little room to move around and change their scenery throughout the day. And try to remind the faculty not to load the students up too much, but definitely to make sure that they're engaged and keep the communication open. That's really the key.
And just to put it out there, if it would help, and with the change of pace, the Japan American Society of Georgia, we can offer virtual workshops, presentations. We can set up, calls with, business and community leaders if it would help. And there are actually a few other Japan American societies on the call right now too. And, we have close to 40 other societies in our network. So I'm sure universities around the country, if it would help for support from nonprofits like ours and other organizations to they have more of a voice or kind of another outlet, a different face or a different kind of change of pace that would help students, we're here to help too. So don't hesitate to ask.
Super.
No, I think that, yeah, I mean, that's a great idea, Yoshi. I think that if Japan American Society could put together some sort of webinar on how employers are viewing the job search right now, how they're looking at finding employees right now and searching for employees in this time, and how they're running their hiring, are things on hold or things not on hold? How are they interviewing? That kind of thing would be great for students who are graduating.
Yeah, the other question to that would be, I like that idea very much. The question that comes to mind is to what extent with the COVID-19, how that might impact the need for different kinds of work skill sets than maybe they were looking for prior to this event. And I don't know if that's there or not, but that would at least be an interesting question to hear their reaction to.
Yeah, I think to your point earlier, I think they're learning what it is that they don't know, and they didn't know prior to this what they didn't know, but I think that's an ongoing process. A question that I did want to ask, although it's kind of, I like to save the broccoli for last, if you will. One of the big things.
I thought dessert was last.
Did we eat dessert first, or was the vegetables last?
Dessert is always first. Always first. With regards to an institution like higher education has to be compliant with various laws, FERPA being the most common one.
Yeah.
Do your institutions have FERPA policies in place, and how are they working with that to address the new norm?
Oh, that is a great question. So the easy answer is yes. But when we are moving into this distance format where we have everybody coming in, if you're running synchronous mode, okay, and people are joining like we are, so it becomes a question. One is that the students can elect or not to share video, because that potentially is an invasion of personal privacy. For any number of reasons, it doesn't matter. How that also plays into our scenario is with respect to testing. And so we have, how do you monitor testing? And we've already, one of our biggest challenges, unfortunately, is trying to maintain the integrity of the testing environment. And so we have a variety of different tools that we use, like lockdown browsers and responders and so on and so forth. But in fact, at least through this iteration, and since the individuals did not elect into this format, we will not be able to use some of the ProctorU controls and so on and so forth, because of this very concern around FERPA and any potential of liabilities and invasion of privacies and so on and so forth. So that's an excellent question.
Okay, thank you. Julie, did you have anything to add on that? Or?
I don't really have anything to add now. I mean, we're also exploring lockdown browsers, and we also have policies that you can't force a student to share their video. I think that's pretty standard across the board. Well,
I wanted to ask if we were talking to a faculty member at a small university, because we're fairly large and we have good support networks with us. What kind of advice would you offer to them if they're trying to adjust to this with maybe they don't have these kind of tools in place, they don't have this kind of support network?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I have to say that our technology folks, both at the college level and the university level, have been phenomenal, as well as our Center for Teaching and Learning, and putting up all kinds of things. But the fact is that there's a fair number Well, first of all, there is a lot out there that is free or low priced that you can use for your platforms, right? And Zoom being one example, but there are others out there. And the only thing I would say there is that if you're using those, you need to be very mindful of setting the proper security levels and so on, so that you don't have unexpected events happening in your session and those kinds of things, right? The other is there are a ton of videos and YouTube and other locations that help you see how to use this tool and best practices and so on and so forth. It's time consuming. It's time consuming even with all of the support, I have to say. The learning curve, even if you've been doing it for a while, if you're doing it so fast and in mass, it's time consuming. But those are some resources that you could go to, and then talk to your colleagues that are at other institutions that maybe have those resources, and everybody's willing to share, you know. So what's the best guideline to give my students to what does it mean to have substantive responses on discussion forums, you know, and things like that, that you don't have to recreate the wheel. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I mean, there are so many resources out there that are offering low or no cost services right now. And I think so many professional organizations that are offering free webinars. You know, this is a great time to build your network if you don't have a strong network. But if you do have a strong network, you know, reaching out to others in your network, pulling together a small group of professionals that you trust that are from well-resourced schools, and just ask them, you know, have a happy hour with them one night and pick their brain, that kind of thing. You've got Zoom now, so use that, and just tap into your network.
Right, and if I could put in my own little plug there, we also have a fair to mid-level podcast that for people who are teaching international business. Some of the episodes have actually been used by other universities, including one in Canada, that were actually assigned to students, and those are available. And we're working on new episodes coming out with that as well. Well, I think our time here is up, and we have to allow Al Hodge to give some closing remarks. But I just wanted to say to both to Julie and Karen, and to Yoshi as well, thank you very much. This has been very informative and useful to me, and I come out of it with a new enthusiasm, and I hope that the people who listen to it also have some useful information, direction, and optimism that I share. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Well, I think what we come out of this is, you know, the more we communicate, the more we collaborate. We're all in this together. So I think the better for all of us. So, but at this time, I would like to introduce our chair, Mr. Al Hodge. He is the president and CEO of Hodge Consulting Services and former president and CEO of the Rome Floyd Chamber. So, Mr. Hodge, for some closing remarks, please.
Much, and certainly thank you to our panelists and our moderator. We really have JASG as resource. One of the items that is a continuing theme among others is collaboration, and the ability for Japan American Society of Georgia to respond to the members as well as be proactive and anticipate some of the interests, the needs, and support mechanisms. I give great credit to Yoshi for this, along with some great board members and others that are involved. Jim and Karen have been very helpful on our board over the years, and certainly are that way today. Mercer, thank you. Julie, for your work in the international realm and for the next generation of students. If you take a look at communications, relationships, technology, creativity, and better yet, innovation, Japan American Society of Georgia is all about that. And to all of the panelists' points as well, is that now more than ever, the global economy, the global culture and society is more important. And therefore, the relationships, the public policy issues to at least be aware and to educate ourselves and to communicate with our electeds as well as the appointed officials about all of these items. All of this at a time, by the way, where the Japanese business investment is the #1 investment in the state of Georgia for our international companies. So again, very, very timely, and we want to see that momentum continue. And I'm confident that after the crisis, that we'll be able to be even stronger than before. For both the Japanese companies and for the Georgia companies doing business with and in Japan. And with some of that in mind, we have some great programs that are coming up. Those include excuse me for just a moment. Those include the Kyoba Kai. We are doing some virtual programming now, and we look forward to that. We've also had, and that's April 14th, by the way, several of the programs that we have been having in person around the state have also gone virtual. We've also had a number of changes. So I would invite you to take a look at jasg.org and look at the calendar events to make certain that you're aware and then sign up. To our members, we thank you for your continuous support. And to folks that are not yet members, there are only two kinds, members and future members. We look forward to your active participation. Yoshi and panelists, we thank you again. We look forward to more like this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye.